Welcome to the Black Box App Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Johnson. Really excited for this opportunity to share this conversation. Followed this gentleman for quite some time on LinkedIn and just kind of watched how he moved in the space and some of the things he was doing. Today, our guest is Mr. Chris Rose. Chris is Vice President of Scheduling and Acquisitions for A&E Networks. So when I saw Chris originally, he was on a panel conversation about diversity and inclusion in the media industry. That might have been a year or two ago. And now we're here today on the Black Box App Podcast. Mr. Rose, thank you so very much for joining us today, sir.
Kenneth, it's great to be with you. Followed you and your career on LinkedIn for a long time and really excited to talk to you about your company and my career.
Well, thank you so very much. This is all about you today, my friend.
All right.
So look, you know, the title, man, you're in a VP role. The Black Box App Podcast is all about showcasing African-American males or Black males in general that are doing, I'm going to say amazing things, but very impactful things in the world of work and corporate America and entrepreneurship. So I'd like for you to kind of take me on your career journey. Like, is there a media interest behind the work you do? Or did you kind of just find your way through filtering through? How did it happen for you?
Yeah, so growing up in Long Island, which is right outside of New York City, I grew up there. I have an older sister, and I've, always been a fan of television, from, coming home from school and doing your homework and catching up with, whatever was airing on your local television, whether it was reruns of Different Strokes or Good Times or Leave It to Beaver or you name it, the Brady Bunch. I've always had an interest in television and a love for television. I initially thought I wanted to, be a sportscaster. So actually, when I was in high school, I wrote a letter to Marv Albert, who was then, the big dog at NBC Sports. And I wrote a letter to him expressing my interest and asking for ways I can get into the business. And not expecting him to write back, but he actually did write back about a month later, indicating, the things I needed to do, the steps I needed to take. And he said, oh, by the way, you should look into Syracuse University, which is his alma mater. So as I, progressed through high school and was applying to colleges, Syracuse was one of the schools that was on the top of my list. Syracuse has one of the best, communication schools, Newhouse. Shout out to the Newhouse Mafia in the industry. So I applied to Syracuse. I got into Syracuse, and that's kind of how I, made my journey into television, where I studied, production and journalism and a little bit of PR. You kind of get the business of television was actually a big thing that you learn about too. The research behind it. How do shows get not only made, but what happens when they air? Like, how did that show perform? What was the audience flow behind that show? So it really gave you kind of a 360 view into television and the business of it. I didn't end up obviously being a sportscaster, but I did major in television, radio, and film, and that's kind of was my entry into the TV world after I graduated Syracuse. And the way I was able to do that was in my senior year of college, I interviewed with an alum of Syracuse who, worked at a company called Katz Media. Katz Media is one of the top research rep firms in the country, representing various different TV stations throughout the country. It gave me an understanding of research. My ultimate goal was not to work in research. It was to get into TV scheduling and strategy. But research gives you a good stepping stone in terms of understanding the numbers, understanding the business of television, it was really like an entry point to getting to where I got to today.
Wow, amazing.
That was, yeah.
It's interesting. So you're speaking about Newhouse and the RTVF major and all of that. There's so many different things I want to touch on real quick. Of course, one of my colleagues here in Harlem that I spend quite a bit of time with, just from an entrepreneurship standpoint, she helps entrepreneurs around the world actually kind of get their ideas into action. Her name's Gina Ramcharan, but she is a Syracuse alum. So always jumping through with the Syracuse merch on and all of that stuff. So, but I'm from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, where Ernie Davis is originally from. So there's a Syracuse following that it's an unspoken Syracuse support in that neighborhood. Now, we're in the middle of University of Pittsburgh, Big East country, so we're Pitt fans over here, and I'm a Pitt alum, but I do have a great deal of respect for Syracuse. So listen, the story, you write Marv Albert writes back a month later, but look, this is the world we're living in. You know, now you would have gotten on Twitter and hit him up, and he might have sent you back, you can follow his moves, but that's amazing that he wrote you back.
I was shocked and amazed, and for some reason I don't have that letter anymore, but that was actually what spurred my interest in Syracuse, because prior to that, I didn't know that Syracuse was, I knew of Syracuse was watching, college football games or college basketball games, the Big East games. I wasn't as familiar with, the reputation of Newhouse and the school itself, but that was what spurred me to apply there later in high school.
All right, so did you go from Cats to A&E? Like, tell me kind of what happened from Cats.
So great question. So the answer is no. So I worked in a series of ad sales research jobs. And, as I mentioned, it was hard to make that transition into scheduling and strategy because there are not a lot of jobs around. But I did, move up the ladder through a series of jobs. I went from Cats to NBC. I went from NBC to Turner, and I went from Turner to Fox. But I will say, amidst those, it was about 7 or 8 years of those jobs, I got laid off. So for anybody watching, I would say, layoffs happen. It's not the end of the world. It happens to a lot of us, but I think it's how you, recover from, getting laid off or from that setback, how you, recover from that. I was fortunate because from, the first layoff I had actually interviewed with the person who ended up being my future boss. So when he heard that I had gotten laid off, he reached out to me and said, "Oh, hey, we have this opening. Do you want to come over?" So I think I was only laid off for about 6 weeks at that time. And then the second time it happened at Fox, and I told myself, I don't want to keep doing a series of research jobs. Let me finally make this transition into scheduling and content strategy. So there's an organization called NAMIC, which stands for National Association of Multi-Ethnicity in Communications. So it's an organization for people of color who work in the communications industry. And at this time, they had a book with everybody's name in the organization, hundreds of names. So what I did was I reached out to everybody who was doing the job that I wanted to do. And, I sent them emails, I did cold calls, I did informational interviews, all across 2 or 3 months. And, by the end of the 3 months, I had reached out to someone at BET who was looking for someone to do kind of a hybrid research content strategy role. And that was my kind of entryway into transitioning into scheduling and strategy.
Man, you just gave a mini TED talk on how to do it. Just the way you kind of did your research, made a target list, right? And then you had action on that activity, right? You start reaching out to individuals, exploring ways to connect through informational interviews, and then securing an opportunity. That's the blueprint right there. So within all of that, before we even move from that particular piece, I just have another question, and this is like personal for me. So tell me what your job entails. What do you do in your role in scheduling and acquisitions as the vice president?
Great question. So I am responsible. So just to step back, A+E Networks consists of History Channel, A&E Network, Lifetime Movie Network, FYI, which is a lifestyle channel, and we have a joint partnership with Vice for Viceland. So I work specifically on the History brand, and I'm responsible for over 400 hours of premiere content each year on the network. That's inclusive of series and specials and tent poles and mega docs. So we set the agenda for the network. We work closely with our original programming team, research, marketing, PR, non-linear platforms. We're kind of like the nerve center of the company, and the goal is to create hits. We don't produce the shows, but we work with the programming team to roll out the shows, figuring out the best time to launch a show, working with the sales team to help monetize revenue around these shows, working with the marketing team to make sure that the shows are promoted in the correct way, working with the research team to ensure that, we know how we expect the show to perform. And once it does premiere, how is that show performing? And are there any tweaks we can make in terms of, should we be running at another day part? Should we be running at a different time? All with the goal of, maximizing revenue for the network and creating, brand defining hits on the network. The other part of it is acquisition. So we acquire content for the network. Typically it's been theatrical movies. So, the audience make of our network is older. It's usually median age of about 60 years old. So we're acquiring older content. So, military films, World War II type content, really content that speaks to that age group and that audience.
Man, amazing. Chris Rose, Vice President, Scheduling and Acquisitions at A+E Networks here on the Black Box App podcast. Listen, I thought you were on the A&E side because I'm up all night watching First 48. I was going to say, hey, move that up so I can get some sleep. Move that up so I can get some sleep.
There's a lot of First 48 fans.
For sure. So I want to speak about another piece of the career journey. You're in a leadership role as a VP, and you spoke about what's it, NEMAC? NAMIC. You spoke about NAMIC. And I would imagine you're probably active in the organization.
I am.
So as a leader, as someone who's had success in the space, what advice do you give people? And we're going to tap in on a couple different levels. What advice would you give somebody at the entry level, and any of the people that are listening or watching this podcast? He just gave you great entry level advice, but I'm going to see if he repeats it again. But he gave you the blueprint, but also mid-career and senior level individuals. What advice do you have for people at those three stages on kind of where their focus areas should be?
Yeah, I would say for the early stages, the first thing to do is establish organic relationships. I can't emphasize enough how crucial it is to have a relationship with someone, excuse me, before you need them. Because no one likes to be hit up for advice or for you to reach out to them, only when you need something, right? So I think one of your guests before, Mark Hall, mentioned, establish those relationships, reach out to them, keep in touch, let them know how you're progressing. Not only tell about yourself, but ask them how they're doing. Can you be of service to them, right? Because no one wants to be a one-sided relationship, when you're establishing these relationships. I would say for mid-career, same thing, but I would add another layer. I would say make sure you have an advocate, right? And an advocate is usually someone who advocates for you when you're not in the room. So if it's time for them to make a decision about should Chris get hired or get promoted, make sure you have someone in the room who's advocating for you, can advocate for how well of a job you're doing, because you need those people. And sometimes they may be people that you don't expect it to be, right? You may have that knight in shining armor that you don't know exists. And sometimes it may be the people that you think are going to help you who don't help you. So definitely make sure you have an advocate or two. And I would say the final thing is, as you progress in your career, don't forget to keep learning, because I think sometimes we tend to get, complacent. Oh, hey, the job is going well, I'm doing well, and we forget to stop learning. So I would impress upon people that it's still important to keep learning. And if you feel like you're not growing in your career, maybe take a self-assessment of yourself and figure out, is this the right position for me, or is there another place that I need to be working?
Man, great information. You're speaking about it as it's supposed to run. Listen, where do you add value as an entry-level employee? Like, find spaces where you can add value. And that in turn probably is going to produce some advocates and sponsors of your work, people speaking to the work you're doing. And then when you take that to the next level, just continue to be a continuous learner and seek professional development at all levels. So I love the answer. I think it's great information for people at all stages and levels in their careers. And as we speak about kind of careers and you look at resources and tools, are there any resources that you're using to use continuous learning as a ramp up for you, even at this stage in your career?
Yeah, well, you mentioned NAMIC. I've done a couple of different programs through NAMIC. They have a mid-career. When it was earlier in my career, they had a leadership seminar, which was for like early career professionals. And it's like a 2 or 3 day program where you meet with other people from other companies and other media companies and learn about leadership skills and different tools to help you progress in your career. And then they have a what's called an ELDP, Executive Leadership Development Program, which is in partnership with the University of Virginia, which is 3 one-week sessions over the course of, I think, like a 9-month period where you're doing business cases at University of Virginia, Darden School of Business. You're meeting with other top leaders in the industry and studying business cases and also learning about professional development. And then more recently, I had the opportunity to do some classes through Harvard Business School online, which was very tough, but very helpful and fruitful as well. So yeah, I would just encourage people to continue learning. There are tons of resources out there. I have the benefit of being able to work from home. So, and I think like many of us have the benefit of doing so. I think resources are out there and helpful. And, obviously Black Box, there's tons of stuff through the app. A lot of career resources, resume writing tips, cover letter writing tips. So I commend you as well, Kenneth, for having those resources out there for people who look like me and others.
Thank you so very much. I really sincerely appreciate that. And I think a big resource in the Black Box catalog will be these interviews, right? Where people can tap in to Chris Rose, to Mark Hall, as you mentioned, and just kind of get some insight on their thought process and the advice that they're giving to individuals at all career levels. And maybe not write that letter like the Marv Albert letter, but definitely maybe touch base on LinkedIn with Chris Rose and say, hey, I'm striving to do this in the media industry. Do you have any advice for someone? This is what this is all about, supporting one another and kind of uplifting and also showcasing talented individuals like yourself. Once again, we're with Chris Rose, Vice President, Scheduling Acquisitions at A+E Networks. And I'm just excited to have you here today. I want to speak about this. So you were right, like there are resources out here. And now that we're working remotely, a lot of us, it allows us maybe to tap into, instead of that commute time being all about music, the commute time, the commute time can be about professional development at some level. So outside of that particular piece, how do you manage, and this is just listening to you speak, you seem to be a master networker. So how do you manage networking remotely now? Like, has that changed your process in any way?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a master networker, but I will say that, of all the positions that I've been able to get in my career, I would say 90% of them have come through networking with someone, whether that's having a previous relationship with someone who's in that company that I'm applying for, someone being able to pass my resume along. So I think it's very rare that you're able to get a job by submitting your resume online. It goes back to having that advocate within the company who could speak or help, get your resume to the top of the food chain, right? Because companies get thousands of resumes for one position, and how does yours stick out? So it's always going to be helpful if someone who already works at that company can kind of help, advocate for you. But in terms of networking, I would say that, I think the benefit of us all being able to, well, not all, but a lot of us being able to work from home is that everything is equal, right? When we're on the screen together, you're no bigger than I am. I'm no bigger than you are. We're all the same, right? And I would just approach it like just a regular conversation. So if you want to reach out to someone who's doing something that you're excited about, or is in a field that you think is, you want to get into, I don't think it hurts to just say, hey, can I reach out to you and have 15 minutes of your time, right? And I think if you say an hour of your time, you're gonna be like, whoa, that's too much. But if you say 15 or 20, like, okay, I can give 15 or 20 minutes, right? And then as you get into the conversation, it might progress past that, right? But if someone feels like you're kind of taking too much of their time, I think they might be a little less likely to want to do that. But most people like to talk about themselves. I've found, and I think a lot of people are giving of themselves and want to help and give back. So, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of people who've helped me advance in my career, or even just give their time to talk to me.
Wow. Just speaking about kind of the process to reaching out, and with platforms like LinkedIn and things of that nature, it's kind of seamless to do that. And it's interesting, we do career workshops definitely around the Eastern Seaboard, right? We've been to a lot of colleges and universities, and I meet individuals and students and professionals, and they say, listen, Ken, I'm not comfortable reaching out because I don't want to bother people. How about if they don't want to speak to me? And I tell them rejection is part of the process, right? But you're not asking for much. And usually people are on those platforms because they understand that that's the give and take, right? So, I just encourage individuals to stay the course. Yeah, there's going to be some people that it's not friendly. They might not want to share time with you, or they may have something going on. But
Right.
keep going, tap into the next person, and you might meet Chris Rose, who takes the time out to share a quick conversation with you. I
would just add, I think it's important to be persistent, but not overbearing or annoying, because there's kind of like a fine line. So maybe you reach out to them every 2 weeks, not every day, because if you're not hearing back from them, there might be a reason why that person isn't responding, right? They may have a personal situation or a professional situation, but be persistent, but not annoying.
Yeah. There's definitely a strategy to it.
Yeah.
I'm from the old school where there wasn't a LinkedIn, right? So I used to call people, and then I might find out that they're the signature or keynote speaker at a National Association of Human Resources event that's in the city that I'm in. And I just would show up at that event. One, it was professional development for me, but the chances of me meeting them and saying, hey, just wanted to touch base. I had given you a call a couple of weeks ago. Decided to come here and hear you speak. I'm a big fan of your work. Would love to share some time in the future with you if possible. And usually there was a card exchange and we made it happen. But that was the thing. You had to be persistent because you don't know what situation people are going through that may not allow them to kind of lean into you at that time.
Exactly right.
Well, listen, man, I'm so excited to have you, participate today. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Listen, Chris Rose, Vice President, Scheduling and Acquisitions at the A+E Network on the Black Box App Podcast. Man, it's been great. If you could do me a favor, please let our listeners and our audience know how they can continue to stay connected to you and your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. And Kenneth will have all the details when he posts this up on the LinkedIn site, and through Black Box. And LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. I'm on there constantly every day, seeing all the great things that everyone is doing, including Kenneth. Congrats on this podcast and all the great work you're doing, Kenneth.
I really appreciate you, and congrats on your success as well. I've been watching you, man, and I'm so happy and proud of the work you're doing. And it's great to be able to showcase you on the Black Box App Podcast. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kenneth.